Okay, so we'll be solving October 2025, paper 2-2, question number 8, the 15-marker question. Okay, so
Okay.
first we'll read through the question and then we'll try to figure out what are the requirements and then we'll visualize.
Sure.
Okay, so the question says there's a 1D array called random number, which is used to store 100,000 random integers. Then there's going to be a 2D array, which will be called counted number, which is used to store the integers 1 to 10 and the frequency of each integer, the number of times it was generated. Okay.
Okay,
Then
sir.
they're saying generate 100,000 random integers between 1 to 10 inclusive. Store each integer in the appropriate array and calculate the frequency of each integer from 1 to 10 and store these values in appropriate array. Okay, let's first look at this part. So we'll visualize it as you always do. So they're saying that there is going to be an array, random number, which will store 100,000 random integers. So I'm assuming an array with 100,000 indices. Now the random values inside would be between 1 to 10. So in here I have random 1 to 10
Okay, sir.
values. Okay, so then you have to generate 100,000 values and all of them must be between 1 to 10 as per the question requirement. And then in the second array, which is the 2D array called counted number, what we have to do is that they're saying that you are supposed to store the values 1 to 10 and the frequency of how many times they appeared in the array. So if you look at this, here we have the rows. So in the first column, we have all the 10 values, 1 to 10. We have two columns, number and frequency. And in the second column, we have the frequency. So how many times one appears in random number array. So what we'll do is we'll pick one and we'll compare it with all the values, 100,000 values, and we'll count how many times it appears. Then I'll increment the count accordingly and I'll update it at the current row, first row, column 2. So in fact, I should put this is column 1 and then this is column 2. Then we do the same thing, we pick the value at row 2, which is basically 2. So we can either pick the value or we can pick the row number, it's up to you. And then we compare 2 against all the values in the random number array. Then we pick 3, then against all the values, then we pick 4, all the random values. And every time we keep on counting when we encounter a value. So let's say we have 9 here. So 9 appears 1, 2, and maybe 8 more times or 4 or 5 times. So according to that, I'll keep on updating the frequency in the column number 2. This is the basic of the question. Okay, then the question says sort the contents of the counted number array in descending order of frequency. Okay, luckily in this question, they have already given us an example of doing bubble sort on a 2D array. So this is our bubble sorting and they've already given us the test code, which is never the case. This was the first time this happened. So you just have to kind of replicate the code, except you have to replace this A with the array name. Okay, let's do this part first, where they have asked us to count the values against each number. So first of all, what you have to do is we have to populate this random number array with values between 1 to 10 for 100,000 times. So for that, we'll have to go ahead and write the code. And in this case, we have to use the random function. So what does the random function do? We use random in O level and like this. So random will generate a random real number between 0 to 0.99. So if you want to generate number between any range, so you have to use this general expression. The expression is that the random number would be equal to random, and then you have to multiply it with the starting with the difference of the range like this, and then you add the start value in the range. Okay, so what does it mean? So let's say if I ask you to generate number between 10 to 50 inclusive, so we'll write number is equal to start would be 10 plus random function times difference 50 minus 10 would be 40. So what will it do? So let's go for the minimum value. The smallest value random will generate will be 0. So 0 times 40 would be equal to 0, and 0 plus 10 would become 10. Then the maximum value random will generate would be 0.99, and then 0.99 times 40, which is basically equal to, if we just assume 1 for now, so it is essentially going to become 40, and then 40 plus 10 would equal to 50. And then any value in between will be generated randomly. between 10 and 50. So this is a general expression that you have to remember. And since they've asked us to create integer values, we always have to round this whole expression up to 0 decimal places. So we get a nice rounded value. So this would round value to whole number. And this is the perfect generation. Now, keeping that in mind, we'll start a code. So we have 100,000 indices. So I'll run the loop. So for I 1 to 100,000. Also, we have to see what else we have to do in the question. They've asked us that you must use pseudocode and add comments. Okay, must be declared. Okay, so they have asked for declaration. Again, this is usually not the case, but we have to adhere to the instructions. So I'll leave space for declaration. I will advise you do the same as well. So we'll declare values at the end. Okay, so here we have 100,000, and then in the array is called random number. So inside our array random number, at every index will go and will generate a value. So we have to use the same function I wrote before. Random times difference 10 minus 1 is 9, comma 0 to round it off to nearest whole number, and then the starting value will be added. So the starting value is 1 plus this. So this will generate random values between 1 to 10, and we do next I. Okay, so what will it do? It will generate this whole array with values between 1 to 10 for 100,000 times. All right, so we have this array ready now. Now, in the next part, they are saying that we have to maintain the frequency of the integers between 1 to 10. So what we have to do initially is that we have to set this whole column to 0 so that we can essentially count the values one by one. Okay, we cannot leave this empty. So I'll do that first of all. In the first column, I'll save the values from 1 to 10. And then in the second column, I'm going to place all zeros. And that is again very simple. So for j, or let's use I again, for I index 1 to 10. The reason we have 10 is because we have 10 rows in this 2D array. And then this would be next I. And here I'll say counted number current. Okay, let's call it row instead because it's a 2D array. So current row, column 1 would get the row number like as it is, and then counted number will get current row, column 2 would get 0. So what am I doing here? So our value would be initially 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So that is what I'm doing. Whatever the row value is, that will be the first column value. So whatever the row value is, first column value, so on and so forth. And in the frequency, we are putting all the zeros. Okay, then this is also done. So we have initialized the array. Now in the next part, we are supposed to do this. We are supposed to calculate the frequency of each integer. Okay, now in order to do this, we have to pick one value from the 2D array and compare it against all the values in the 1D array. Now, since you are going to pick one value and compare it with all the other values, in this case, we have to use. So we're going to pick these values one by one from each row, and then we're going to compare them against all the values in the random number. So now we have to use a nested loop. And again, nested loop, how many times will it run? So nested loop will have 10 values to pick from. So outer loop would run 10 times. So I'll say for, let's call it maybe row again. So for row 1 to 10, and then for I, or maybe column, whatever you want to call it, 1 2. Okay, so since we have these 10 values and we are supposed to compare them these against 100,000 values, so instead of C, let's call it index 1 to 100,000. Okay, now what we're going to do is we are going to count and we're going to check. So we're going to pick this value, which is in counted number, current row, column 1. So let's write that. So if counted number, current row, column 1 value is equal to, right? So we're talking about this one because it's in column 1, row 1, then row 2, column 1, row 3, column 1, row 4, column 1. So we'll pick this value and we're supposed to compare it against all the values in the random number array. So we are going to check if this value is equal to the random number current index. If that is the case, then we are going to increment the count. Okay, so what is happening at this line? So again, I'm picking one value. I'm picking this one here, and then I'm comparing it, the value of the current index in random number. Our index would initially be 1, so it will compare this one against this 9. Then index would become 2, so I'm comparing this one against 7. Then index becomes 3, and it will be compared against 6. Eventually, it will be compared against all the values up to 100,000 indices. So that's what's happening here. Okay, if that is the case, then what we're going to do is I'm going to go in column 2 of the current row and I'm going to update this count by 1. right? So then this would become 2, then it would become 3, depending on the number of ones. Let's say there are like 41 ones, so it would end up writing 41 here. So in simple terms, we just have to increment the value. So counted number, current row, and for the current row we have to go to column 2 now, because the frequency is in column 2. And I'll say counted number, current row, column 2 plus 1. This is literally same as saying count is equal to count plus 1, just like we do counting. But instead of doing count, we have the 2D array, so we'll write count into that. And we do endif, and then we do next index, and then we do next up row. And for 100,000 times, for every index in the first column, it will run 100,000 times. And by the end of it, when the loop has completed, we would have something like this. We will have frequencies of all the values in column 1 and their frequencies in column 2. Then in the next part, they're saying that sort the contents of the counted number array in descending order of the frequency. Okay, so again, they have given us the starting code. We just have to replace these values with the respective arrays. And also there is this greater than sign here, which is basically checking if the value in current index is greater than value in next index. So in this case, they are basically sorting in ascending order, because if the current value is greater than the next value, then we're swapping them in ascending order. So if you want to do it in descending order, you simply have to flip this the condition, and it would be value in current index. If it is less than the value in the next index, only then we're going to swap. So this is the only change that you have to do, and then you have to change the names as well.
So,
So this is,
could you
so we make this less than sign here, and then we have the temporary variables here to swap these values. So we'll pick the first value, we'll replace it with the other one, and pretty much the same thing. So in this case, now we have two columns. That means we have to swap two values. So when we have 50 and 40 and 30, let's say this is maybe 61. This 61 and this 50. So the current value is less than the next one. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap both of these values. So I'll copy these two values, 2 and 61, into temp. In the question they have called this temp1 and temp2, I believe. It's T1 and T2.
mm,
So we can just call them temp1, temp2, or let's call them T1, T2. And then I'm going to copy these values and I'm going to paste them in the row above them. And in fact, it should be this row. So I'm going to copy the first row into the temporary variables. I'm going to overwrite the second row onto the current row. And then I'm going to bring back the values stored in the temporary variables into the next row. And with this, the values would be swapped in descending order. Now, again, the code is given to us. We just have to fill in the values. So let's start doing that. So this is the part where we are doing bubble sorting in descending order. We'll add comments at the end
descending
as well.
order?
Okay, so we have f is set to true, so I'll just write it quickly. So f is set to true. Also, these are single alphabets which are not good variables name, not good identify names, variable names. So we need to give them some more descriptive variable names. So let's
Verify
call,
ताकि वो ज़्यादा
so
exact हो.
let's call them f is true while f do. Okay, so f is being set to true here whenever there is a swapping that is done. So let's call it swapped. So we'll say swapped, and swapped is initially false. And then the question says while swapped do. Or you don't need to write do, it's up to you. Okay, and then inside this loop, we are going to do all of this. So f is set to false, or swapped is set to, right, this should be true here. And then it's being set to false here. Then we are supposed to run a for loop. So 9 times for index 1 to 9. And then we're going to check if counted number current index current column 2, or again let's call it true, which is much more logical. So if the column 2 of current row is less than the counted number next row plus 1 column 2, which simply means you pick this row and you pick the column 2 and you check if it is less than the value in the next column. So we are comparing 61 with 50. So if that is the case, then you are going to use the temporary variables like we discussed. So temp1 will get the value of the first column, and then temp2 will get the value of the second column. and then we are going to override the value. So counted number current row column 1 will get the value of counted number current row plus 1 column 1, and we do the same thing for this next for the second column. So we just change 1 to 2 and we just change 1 to 2. So what are we doing here? We are essentially just copying this 2 and 61 onto the current row. So now we'll have two values, two rows with the same values, and which is wrong. So that is why we bring back the values from the temp variables that we had stored. So this is the overwriting part, and then we do counted number row plus 1 comma 1 will get the value from temp 1, and then counted number
एक बार
row
apart मुझे समझ
plus 1 comma 2 comma temp 2, and we set the swap to true as well because swapping was done. And eventually there would come a point when, because before we go into the loop, every time we are setting the swap to false, there would come a point where the array would be fully sorted and this condition would never become true, which means the swap would never be set to true, which means eventually this condition would become false and the whole loop would end, and then that will be the end of the bubble sort. So next one, and we do end while. Okay, now going back, now we have to calculate the chance of generating each of the integers 1 to 10 rounded to 4 decimal places. Use the formula chance is equal to frequency divided by 100,000. Output each of the integers in the order they are stored in the counted number array along with the chance of generating them. Okay, so we just have to now calculate the frequency, and what is chance percentage, which is equal to frequency by 100,000 times. So let's say if we have frequency of 2 being generated 61 times, so the probability would be 61 divided by 100,000, and that would be the percentage of chance generation. Okay, so we exit this loop and we do here. So for I 1 to 10, because we have to calculate the chance for these 10 values here. Okay, so we'll calculate. We'll say, first of all, they're saying that we have to calculate the chance of generating each of the values rounded to 4 decimal places. Okay, so let's calculate that and output each of the integers in the order they are stored in along with the chance. Okay, so let's generate the value first. Output, let's generate the value, or let's say the number, and the number will get from our counted number array current row column 1, right? It will always be in column 1. So I'll say counted number current row column 1. Again, let's change this to R for convenience. So this will print the number, and then we have to output the chance overall, chance percentage maybe, or overall chance, I call it. Overall chance would be comma. So here we have to calculate the chance value, and let's use another variable for this, and chance would be counted number. So whatever the current row, column 2. So this would get us the frequency. So for in the second column of the current row, this is the frequency, and then we have to divide it by 100,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We get 100,000 values, but this is not complete. The question says that they must be rounded to 4 decimal places. So I'm going to pick this number and I'm going to, we're only left with the round function now, so we have to wrap this in the round function. So round this whole calculation to 4 decimal place. So round would be, this would be the calculation part, comma 4, and we put the closing brackets, and then we calculate the overall chance, and then we do
why
next.
is it only
Okay, with this, the whole question is complete. Now we are left with two things. They have said to add comments, and then you must declare the value. So let's first add the comments. Again, one comment
we
per,
added
one comment against one block of code is enough. So we can write it inline or before the line, depending on the space that you're left with. So this would be generate 100,000 random numbers. Then here we are essentially initializing the counted number array, and then here we are storing
the
frequencies
frequency. Yes.
in 2D array, and here we are doing bubble sort, and then we are outputting
Frequency.
each number and its chance overall. Okay, and then we also have to do declaration now. So declaration, we have to declare all the variables that we have used, including these for loop variables. So let's start. So we have declared I as integer. Now we'll add all the values in the same line. So random number I, then we have R. Okay, R will also go here. Then we have IDX. IDX also goes here. Then we have, this is endf, and swapped is a boolean. So
Temp.
we'll add, we have declare swapped as boolean. Then yes, we have temp1, temp2. These are both numbers, so they will also go in the integer
Int
line, temp1 and temp2. And I believe that
counter
is,
number.
and
I
then
think we did it.
and chances left. So chance would be real value because we are dividing it by 100,000. And with this, the question is complete.
So yeah.